New Jersey's story is one of industrial might and innovation, but more than anything, one shaped by its geography as the unique location between two major metropolitan centers, New York City and Philadelphia. To see why, join me for this brief look at the history and politics of New Jersey. People have been living in what is now New Jersey for at least 14,000 years. The earliest evidence we have comes from fluted projectile points which have been found in Salem and Burlington counties. In more recent times, roughly around 1000 AD or so, the future state was inhabited by the Lenape people, also known as Delaware. Traditionally divided into three groups based on their dialect and location, including the Munsee, Unami, and Unalaktigo. They were matrilineal clans who lived in close-knit villages. Their diet consisted of the traditional three sisters, corn, squash, and beans, as well as deer and fish, similar to other indigenous peoples living nearby. They also had a unique ball game called pasaheman, which consisted of getting a ball made of deer skin past the goal line and was often played in a men versus women format. The Lenape first came into contact with the Europeans when Giovanni Verrazzano, a Florentine navigator sailing under the French flag, showed up in the area in 1524 in search of a northern route to Asia, the famed Northwest Passage. Verrazzano explored the Jersey shore, including the Sandy Hook and the Narrows. The French became distracted with European wars, however, so no further action was taken in the region. Instead, it would be Henry Hudson, an Englishman sailing under the auspices of the Dutch East India Company in 1609, who would further explore the area, visiting most of the future state's bays. This prompted further voyages, most notably by Adrian Block, and by 1614 the Dutch had mapped the entire coast and began developing a colony they called New Netherland. Attracted by the abundance of furs, the Dutch began creating trading networks and outposts in the region in the 1620s with the Lenape and created the Dutch West India Company to manage it. In 1624, the Dutch constructed Fort Nassau, a trading post in what is now Camden County, which became the first permanent European structure in the future state. Then, the company's director, Michael Poe, a member of the Amsterdam City Council, purchased two tracts from the native population at what is now Castle Point and Harsimus in 1630. There, he would establish Pavonia, a patronship system, a semi-feudal setup that aimed to bring investments and settlers. Several trading posts were established in what is now Jersey City, but Poe was unable to bring enough people to the region, so the company reclaimed it. Soon the fledgling settlements would face even more problems as the new director, Willem Kieft, exacerbated tensions with the Lenape and then ordered attacks on them, including a massacre at Pavonia in February 1643. The natives then retaliated by destroying every homestead on the west side of the Hudson River, killing dozens of settlers and forcing the rest to flee into Manhattan. Kieft would then be recalled and a truce worked out in August 1645. In the meantime, on the other tip of the future state, the Swedes had also established a colony of their own, with similar aims as the Dutch, Nya Sverige or New Sweden. The most important of their settlements in present-day Jersey were Fort Nya Ellsborg in what is now Salem County. This probably led to conflict with the Dutch, who under their new governor, Peter Stuyvesant, decided to drive them out and were successful in 1655. Unfortunately for the Dutch, this control did not last long. Conflicts back in Europe with London resulted in the British takeover of the area in 1664. Charles II then granted future New Jersey to Lord Berkeley and Sir George Carteret, who established it as a proprietary colony and renamed it in honor of Sir Carteret's time as a governor on the island of Jersey. In 1674, Lord Berkeley opted to sell his share to a group of Quakers, which split the colony into East and West. The former became more urban and cosmopolitan, tied closely to the mercantile world of New York, while the latter turned more agrarian and closely aligned with Quaker settlements spreading out from Philadelphia. These divisions would shape not just land ownership patterns and religious affiliations well into the 18th century, but also lead to weak and ineffective government that had trouble collecting taxes and enforcing laws. As a result, in 1702, it would be united once again into a single colony under a royal governor, which would be the same as New York's for nearly 4 decades, starting with Lord Cornbury. During this period, the colony's reputation for religious pluralism, the possibility of agriculture along the fertile lands of the Delaware Valley, and its strategic location between the growing towns of Philadelphia and New York attracted new immigrants, growing from roughly 5,000 people in 1680 to 120,000 in 1770. This also brought the foundation of towns like Morristown in 1715, Trenton in 1719, and New Brunswick in 1730. Others that had been previously founded, like Newark, became townships in 1693. The rise in population created the need for a place to train Presbyterian ministers. So in 1746, the College of New Jersey was founded. It would be renamed Princeton in 1896. Meanwhile, the colony gained its own governor in 1738 and even built a mansion for the office in 1764. Incidentally, the only governor's residence from the original 13 colonies that still remained standing. Nonetheless, tensions remained over taxation and control of the militia, and as discontent spread in the rest of the American colonies after the French and Indian War, New Jersey followed a similar path. The future state had its own Tea Party, for example, when in December 1774, nearly a year after the one in Boston, citizens of Greenwich burned a shipment of tea that had originally been destined for Philadelphia. Among them were several future prominent leaders, including Governor Richard Howell and Representative Ebenezer Elmer. When the war finally broke out, New Jersey's strategic location made it a crucial battleground. It earned the nickname Crossroads of the American Revolution, with over 100 battles and skirmishes fought on its soil, the most important of which were the Battle of Trenton on December 26, 1776, and the Battle of Princeton just days later on January 3, 1777. Both possible because of George Washington's surprise crossing of the Delaware River on Christmas Day, an iconic moment in American history which changed the momentum of the war and allowed the Patriot cause to survive. The American triumph brought a new government under the Articles of Confederation, but its flaws convinced the political elite, including that of New Jersey, to have a constitutional convention in 1787. There, one of its representatives, William Patterson, introduced the New Jersey Plan, a proposal that would be partially adopted and would shape key aspects of the American system of government, including the equality of state power in the Senate and the supremacy of federal law over the states. In the following decades, New Jersey's strategic location allowed it to spearhead some of the earliest manufacturing efforts in the country, starting with the creation of Paterson as the first planned industrial town in the U.S. Founded in 1791 by Alexander Hamilton's Society for Establishing Useful Manufactures, it would become known as Silk City, as the Great Falls of the Passaic River would fuel a booming textile industry. It helped that the state quickly embraced the building of infrastructure like the Morris and Delaware Raritan canals, as well as several railroad lines in the 1830s, which helped make Camden a transportation hub, Trenton into a thriving city that made iron and steel, and Newark into a major center for leather goods, jewelry manufacturing, and brewing. Meanwhile, the state capital was moved to Trenton in 1790 as a compromise given its central location, and in 1844 a new state constitution was enacted. The state's original Magna Carta, written under duress in 1776, had inadvertently allowed black people and women to vote as long as they owned property, making the state the first where both groups managed to cast ballots legally. The legislature restricted this in 1807, however, arguing that this had a corrupting effect on its elections and needed to be cleaned up. The 1844 Constitution maintained this restriction but rescinded the property requirement, allowing universal suffrage for adult white men. Likewise, the state did pass laws to abolish slavery, but its enactment was so gradual that it was the last northern state to wipe it out completely. As the slavery issue became a major point of contention at the national level, the state was divided both because of its economic connections to North and South and its more conservative outlook compared to other northern states. And while it sided with the Union during the Civil War, providing over 80,000 men for the cause, it not only rejected the 14th and 15th Amendments, but its ambivalence with Lincoln was evident. It would become the only northern state to vote against him twice, first in favor of Stephen Douglas and later George McClellan. The latter would also be favored by the state as governor for the 1878-1881 term. New Jersey returned to its previous prosperous path after the war, expanding on its textile industrial base with chemicals and shipping, leading to the creation of important companies such as Campbell's Soup in 1869 and Johnson & Johnson in 1886. It also produced some world-changing innovations, as Thomas Edison established his laboratory at Menlo Park in 1876, developing the first phonograph, the first carbon microphone, which paved the way for the telephone to be put into everyday use, some of the early film technology, and most famously the first practical electric light bulb and the fundamental components underlying electrical infrastructure. This in turn paved the way for the first motion picture production studio in West Orange and the foundation of the largest producer of phonographs in the world, the Victor Talking Machine Company. best known for its Vitrolas, which would later be merged with RCA, becoming also a major music publishing company. Higher education also expanded during this period. Rutgers, founded in 1766 as Queen's College, transitioned from a small religious institution into a comprehensive state university. The establishment of the Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken in 1870 and New Jersey Institute of Technology in Newark in 1881 provided training in engineering and applied sciences, directly supporting the state's industrial economy. Princeton University, though older, rose to national academic prominence during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly under the leadership of Woodrow Wilson, who served as its president from 1902 to 1910 before becoming governor of the state and then U.S. president. The increase in population also continued. Between 1860 and 1920, the number of people in the state nearly quintupled as large waves of Italian, Irish, Polish, and Eastern European immigrants continued to settle in industrial towns, as well as Jewish people who settled disproportionately in places like Newark, Patterson, and Jersey City. Likewise, African Americans, fleeing Jim Crow, settled in Newark, Jersey City, Trenton, and Camden, transforming urban culture and laying the foundations of powerful black political communities. This in turn gave rise to political machines in various counties, most famously Frank Heggs, the mayor of Jersey City, who gained office in 1917 and would dominate New Jersey politics for the next 30 years. Cozy political arrangements like this gave New Jersey a reputation for corruption, as it not only allowed companies to escape antitrust regulation from other states, such as Standard Oil, but was also notorious for using public money in white elephant projects like the Jersey City Medical Center, and later tolerance and even involvement in the smuggling of alcohol during Prohibition, as in the case of Nucky Johnson in Atlantic City, best known because of a character based on him in the show Boardwalk Empire, set in the 1920s. Incidentally, the real Nucky had power in the first place because of the growth of the Jersey Shore as a vacation destination starting after the Civil War with the construction of railroads. Atlantic City became particularly popular after the construction of its boardwalk in 1870 and later the introduction of gambling, illegal though it was. Cape May, which had even earlier roots, became the country's first seaside resort, although it attracted a much wealthier clientele from New York and Philadelphia. Like the rest of the country, the state was hit hard during the Great Depression, suffering a whopping 30% unemployment rate by 1933. But unlike many other states, its economy was supercharged by World War II. This was because the state played a crucial role in wartime manufacturing, producing ships, aircraft engines, chemicals, and munitions. Cities like Elizabeth and Bayonne buzzed with factory work, and military installations such as Fort Dix and Picatinny Arsenal became central to the war effort. Port Newark grew into one of the busiest shipping centers on the East Coast. Meanwhile, during the 1930s, New Jersey was also the setting for 3 events that became infamous. The first was the heartbreaking kidnapping of a baby from his house in East Amwell. The child in question was the son of Charles Lindbergh, the famed aviator who became the first person to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic. The kidnapping sparked a massive investigation, but tragically the baby was found dead a little over a month later, while it would take over 2 years for the prime suspect, Richard Hauptmann, to be arrested. Hauptmann's trial became a sensation, and even now some people believe he was innocent. But in the end, he was convicted and executed for the kidnapping on April 3, 1936. Another tragic event occurred the following year, when the Hindenburg, a Zeppelin airship carrying some 90 passengers, tried to dock at the Naval Air Station in Lakehurst and caught on fire, leading to 36 deaths, including one poor worker on the ground. As a result, this type of transportation basically ended overnight and remains so to this day. The last infamous occurrence was a radio broadcast in 1938 of the War of the Worlds, which convinced some listeners in New Jersey that there really was a Martian invasion with its epicenter 22 miles from Trenton. Although the panic was less spread than newspapers later reported, it became an early example of the power of mass media. The post-war years brought yet another rewriting of the New Jersey Constitution, which had become clunky and outdated. The charges not only expanded the power of the governor, granting him 4-year terms instead of 3, but also codified a number of rights, banning discrimination, which at the time were not prohibited under federal law. Meanwhile, the federal highway program of the 1950s and the rise of the automobile fueled a dramatic suburban boom. The construction of the New Jersey Turnpike opened in 1951, and the Garden State Parkway opened in 1954, made it possible for millions to live in suburban communities while working in New York or Philadelphia. Suburbs like Paramus, Edison, and Cherry Hill grew rapidly, accompanied by new schools, shopping centers, and industrial parks. Simultaneously, Cold War tensions sustained growth in electronics, chemicals, and military production, with companies like Bell Labs making significant advances like the transistor in 1947 and some of the early cellular technology. Yet the prosperity of the post-war period was not evenly distributed. The state's urban cores began to suffer from deindustrialization, white flight, and disinvestment. Newark, once a bustling commercial hub, saw its tax base shrink and infrastructure deteriorate. The 1967 Newark riots, sparked by police brutality and systemic inequality, symbolized the frustrations of many black residents. Originally incited by the arrest and beating of cab driver John Smith on July 12, the riots lasted 5 days, resulting in the deaths of 26 people, including 16 civilians, 1 police officer, and 1 firefighter. In addition, there were hundreds of people injured and thousands that were detained. The overall damage was estimated at $10 million, as thousands of businesses were destroyed, most of them in the downtown, Central Ward, and Fourth Ward areas. Asbury Park, a town in the Jersey Shore, saw similar riots 3 years later. This time, unemployment and anger at being blocked from the town's main economic engine, tourism, was the main reason. The outcome was extensive damage to the once thriving Springwood corridor and significant decline throughout the next 3 decades. Only in the 21st century would there be signs of revitalization. The one bright spot for the town during this period was its connection to Bruce Springsteen, who kept playing benefit shows to help the city and would mythologize it in his lyrics. Meanwhile, Camden, once a thriving industrial powerhouse, became one of the poorest and most violent cities in America by the turn of the century, though recent revitalization efforts have made some gains. Atlantic City also fell on hard times as aging infrastructure and easier access to far-flung places diminished its allure. Voters gave it a lifeline in 1974 when they legalized gambling in the city via referendum. This brought casinos and some investment in the 1980s, lifting the city's fortunes for a while. But by the 1990s, it was clear that while the casinos were thriving, the promise surrounding urban renewal would not materialize. By the 2010s, many a casino began to fail, most famously Trump Plaza in 2014. And in 2016, the state of New Jersey took over the city to prevent bankruptcy, similar to what had happened in Camden in 2002. New Jersey politics in the latter half of the 20th century featured prominent and sometimes reform-minded figures. Governor Brendan Byrne expanded the state's environmental protections, implemented the income tax, and supported urban redevelopment. Thomas Keene, a moderate Republican, championed education reform and gained national recognition during and after his time in office, eventually chairing the 9/11 Commission. Christine Todd Whitman, elected in 1993, became the state's first female governor and pursued tax cuts and environmental regulation before serving in the George W. Bush administration. The rise of figures like Cory Booker, who served as mayor of Newark from 2006 to 2013 and was later elected to the U.S. Senate, reflected renewed political engagement in urban areas. During this period, the state also produced a wide array of influential artists, musicians, writers, and performers. Frank Sinatra from Hoboken and Bruce Springsteen from Freehold became global icons of American music. Whitney Houston from East Orange brought gospel-rooted pop to international audiences. Philip Roth, who wrote extensively about Newark, is considered one of the greatest American novelists of the 20th century. There were also major figures in television and film, including Meryl Streep, Queen Latifah, Jon Stewart, and David Chase, creator of The Sopranos. Higher education expanded even further in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Rutgers absorbed several smaller institutions to become a more unified, research-intensive public university system, including its merger with UMDNJ, the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, in 2013. Princeton remained among the top global universities, especially in the humanities and sciences. New Jersey also invested in community colleges, technical schools, and medical research centers, aligning higher education with new economic sectors like biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, and information technology. Today, New Jersey remains a microcosm of the United States, racially diverse, economically complex, and politically consequential. Its challenges include high taxes, traffic congestion, urban inequality, and housing affordability. But its strengths, excellent public schools, world-class universities, a skilled workforce, and proximity to global financial and cultural centers, continue to make it one of the most important and dynamic states in the country. As it faces the future, New Jersey's ability to balance inclusive growth, environmental sustainability, and innovation will shape its role in the 21st century American story.